one of these men, dressed in khaki, he looked like a soldier, was shoveling the snow away from the footpaths. I looked and I thought, this is not a soldier, this is the Tsar himself cleaning the paths of his garden. What is he doing, mademoiselle? I asked. He can't be the Tsar. Yes, she said. You see, he's been deposed. It's the revolution. He's a prisoner in his own palace, and he's not allowed to go out. He is guarded. And he's doing this to get some exercise.
What amazed me, I was a little girl then, was that the Tsar was dressed in an old coat, which was all stained. It wasn't even clean. There were no decorations, nor epaulets. Many years have passed. I'm 90 now, but I still remember it. I still remember the Tsar's expression. There was such pain and suffering, and tears in his eyes.
The family's situation at the Winter Palace was house arrest rather than imprisonment, but it was still a far cry from their previous life. Still, the family retained its humor and humanity. The teacher Gilliard wrote of the girls' reaction to a humiliating treatment for the measles from which they had just recovered.
The Grand Duchesses have had their heads shaved as a result of their illness. When they go out in the park, they wear scarves arranged so as to conceal the fact. Just as I was going to take their photograph, at a sign from Olga, they all suddenly removed their hats. I protested, but they insisted, much amused at the idea of seeing themselves photographed like this.
The leaders of the new provisional government were nervous about having the former Tsar so close to the capital. The simplest solution would have been to send the family abroad to one of their European relatives. But they could hardly go to their cousin the Kaiser, with whom Russia was still at war. So the new government requested and received asylum in Great Britain for the Romanovs. But the English king, George V, the cousin of both Nicholas and Alexandra, was unprepared for the public outcry.
Inside England, of course, tempers were running against the Tsar and his German spy wife. All nonsense, of course. She was not a German spy. She was more English than anything else. But that was the situation in England.
George V in 1917 is very worried about the threat to conservatism in general, but to the dynasty in particular, from the socialist movement, from the working class. He doesn't want his dynasty to be associated with the hated Romanovs, let alone the hated and fallen Romanovs.
So King George withdrew the offer of asylum. His cousin, the former Tsar, was now an international pariah.
I'm certainly not ready to criticize King George for withdrawing an invitation to come to the Tsar. Secondly, I'm sure, and a grandmother used to tell me that, the Tsar never wanted to leave Russia. He would have left only if his wife would have asked him to leave.
But there is no record of such a request from Alexandra. For the time being, the family stayed at Tsarskoye Selo. But the world had not stopped. Russia was still at war with Germany, but the Germans had a secret weapon, the banned radical Vladimir Lenin, whom they now sent back to Russia on a sealed train. The Germans knew they could count on a favor from Lenin if he took power. A legend has grown up around his triumphant return to Petrograd's Finland train station. But in fact, there was a scramble to find people to greet him.
I met Lenin at the Finland station. It was the second day of Easter. Lenin's sister Maria produced his telegram saying, "I will arrive tonight at 11. She said, "How are we going to manage to collect people to meet Lenin, to give him a fitting welcome?" And they answered, "That's all right. The soldiers are on leave, and at the meetings taking place all over the town, they will be informed that Lenin is arriving."
Lenin's trick was to say what many wanted to hear, and what the Germans had sent him back to say.
Lenin had the populist touch. "Peace and land for the people," he proclaimed. "You soldiers," and there were about 200,000 soldiers in Petrograd, "none of you will have to go to the front if you support the Bolsheviks." And they all supported Lenin. Who'd want bloody and dirty trenches when it was much better here in the capital?
Lenin's true hour of glory was still to come. First, he had to tackle Kerensky, who was becoming a leader of the new provisional government. Lenin's propaganda machine went to work on Kerensky, but Lenin's ultimate focus was on the Romanovs, who had been responsible for the hanging of his older brother years before. Lenin wanted them all dead. Even though the deposed Tsar and his family were becoming a liability. The moderate revolutionary Kerensky felt responsible for the Romanov safety.
I had the thankless task of telling the former Tsar he would have to move away. "The Bolsheviks are after me," I said, "and soon they will be after you." Contrary to my expectations, he took the news calmly and expressed his wish to go to the Crimea. Instead, I chose Tobolsk in Siberia, which was without railway communications. I knew that the governor's house was fairly comfortable and could provide decent accommodation for the Imperial Family.
As the sun rose on August the 14th, the moment came for the once Imperial Family, with their many trunks and cases, and at least 24 members of the Tsarist household, to leave.
It got quite light. We drank tea, and finally at 5:15 Kerensky said we could go. The sunrise that saw us off was beautiful. We left Tsarskoye Selo at 6:10 in the morning.
The journey into exile was long and slow. 4 days in a train, 2 more on a paddle steamer. On the evening of the 20th of August, they finally reached Tobolsk. Nicholas had once visited the Kremlin here a quarter of a century before. He had stayed in the governor's house, and it was in this very house, renamed Freedom House since the Revolution, that the Romanov family were now to be prisoners.
We examined everything in the house from bottom to attic. Many rooms have an unattractive view, and then went to the so-called garden. Nasty. The sense of being locked up is much stronger than at Tsarskoye Selo.
By the late fall of 1917, Lenin and his Bolsheviks were poised to seize power. On November 7th, by the Western calendar, the Bolsheviks headed for the Winter Palace, now the stronghold of Kerensky's 7-month-old government. It is one of Soviet history's most legendary moments. The location is genuine enough, but the film's depiction of the famous storming is remembered differently by some.
There was no storming as such. Well, there was a storming, but there was no bloodshed, because all the young cadets, they were just boys, really. They just threw down their arms and surrendered.
Vladimir Antonov Ovsienko was in charge of the famous storming of the Winter Palace.
My father called it a coup, a takeover, and that's why there were practically no casualties. He could have been shot, and his sailors too, but nothing like that happened. The government fell like a ripe pear from the tree.
The provisional government was destroyed, but the damage to the palace consisted of chipped paintwork and a broken window. Kerensky managed to flee Petrograd, never to return. Lenin and the Bolsheviks were now the rulers of Russia. Lenin, whose return to Russia had been engineered by Germany, pushed for peace. In one stroke of the pen, he conceded great tracts of the Russian Empire's western borderlands, nearly 500,000 square miles and more than 1/3 of the population. Peace was popular enough with the demoralized soldiers, who fraternized with German soldiers at the front. But it split the country. In the south, an anti-Bolshevik white army came into being. It was immediately countered by a Bolshevik Red Army. A civil war was brewing, in which the Bolsheviks' main weapon was coercion, the Red Terror.